Hello, Ahorja. Welcome to Stories, Legends and Wonders of Álainn. Álainn is also known as Inis Mór, the largest of the three Aran Islands. I'm Dara Malloy, Dara Ómé Lia as Gaeilge. Today I'm bringing you to Teampall An Cheathrair Álainn. You can see it's about 300 metres from this little sign here, which is on the main road from Kilronan to Dúnaingasa, upper road, in a village called, it's just past Óchill, where the Catholic Church is. The next village is called Cowrach, and we're in Cowrach now. And this is a turn to the left off that road going up the hill. You can see also here that it's a signpost for Labba, Yermada agus Gráine. So that's a very ancient dolmen further up the hill. But we'll visit that another day. Today we're going to visit Teampall An Cheathrair Álainn, the Church of the Comely Saints, and there's four of them, the Church of the Four Comely Saints. It's a beautiful expression for four men actually, but they were called Álainn, or beautiful. So let me bring you up there now. So we're travelling up this narrow lane, you can see it here, round a few twists and turns, and we'll eventually get to a stile in the wall and a signpost. So make sure you don't walk past that. It's just around the corner here. And we've got the signpost here to direct us in over the wall. Now this is a tricky bit. I suppose the first part of it is easy enough. You follow the track, but you can take a wrong turn as well, so I need to lead you carefully. So you see another stile in the wall here, and we cross over. It's been nicely repaired for us with a lot of cement to make it nice and easy for us to cross over. Now we're on a very narrow patch here. Now here's where you can make a mistake and go left. Don't go left. Go straight on. Up another step. 2 steps. Down 2 steps. Across a rough patch of field, and you're looking to go stepping up a wall now. So again, you don't step through the gap into the field, because that you don't go in there. What you do is you step up this wall here. Do you see? You're going to walk along the top of that wall there. Do you see? And then the church is just in here. That's it there. Let's do it. We're coming to the last part of our little pilgrimage now into the sacred location by coming to another stile, which we have to step over and step in. So you need to do this only if you're agile enough to do it, because you can hurt yourself getting across these walls, that's for sure. Now I'm in. Just to give you an overview, there's the lovely church. At this end of the church, which would be the east end, there are the 4 graves of the 4 saints, and this is really the focal point of any pilgrim's journey. So in over the little boundary wall, and looking down you see the four saints. And the four saints remembered here are Fursey, who actually ended up in France and was very, very famous in France as a miracle worker and a mystic and so on. And when he died, his body was incorrupt, and they built a big cathedral to house the body in the end. So very well known in northern France, not so well known here, but his name is Fursey and he's Irish. He was born in Galway. Maybe that's why his grave is remembered here. Now, so he's not buried here for certain, because we know his body's in France. But maybe, you know, in those days they took relics from the body. They took a finger or a thumb or a toenail or whatever. Maybe a part of his body is buried here. And that might be true of the other three saints buried here as well, because maybe none of them are actual physical bodies buried here, but only relics of the bodies. Because the next person in here is Brendan of Birr. So that Birr is County Offaly, and I believe there's a grave down there for him too. So I'd say that's more his grave than this place here. But again, you know, if he's buried, if part of his body is buried here, or if he's remembered here, it's because he was regarded as a very important saint in the Irish tradition. We know he was great friends with St. Columkill, for example. So he was a big fish, if you like, in the pond at that time. And to have a relic of his body here would draw pilgrims. And that was the whole idea. You know, the big attraction for pilgrims to a monastic site like this was the grave of the saint. It could be the founder, but in this case, unless one of the other two are the founder, we don't know much about them. They're St. Berchan and St. Conall. We don't know much about them. Conall is still a popular name in Ireland, and some young people here on the island have been called Conall. And so, you know, it is a popular name, but I don't know personally very much about St. Conall and his history, nor do I know much about St. Berchan. There's also a St. Brecon here, so that could be one and the same person, or it could be two different people. So this grave here is much older than the church, which sides up against it. And the church is built probably in the Middle Ages sometime, long after the grave. The graves would be 9th century or earlier. The church is probably even 15th century. It's much more recent. But maybe there was an older church built here before it. I'm quite sure there was, because this was a monastic settlement. And up along the hill here, on the south side of the island, the south side of this monastic site, all the monastic community buildings would have been built, the remains of which, some of them are still in the ground. There's the remains of one beehive hut, Clochan as it's called, up on the hill up here. But I want to bring you in now through this little gap in the wall to show you the Holy Well. This is a most beautiful holy well, kept meticulously by the local people, and clearly a sacred place. A jug there for people to get their water from and fill their bottles and bring home with them if they want to. The remains of a rosary beads there, and the water flowing through it all the time. Very clean water. It's possible to drink the water up here because it's above all the houses, and so it's not polluted in any way. So I'd feel fairly safe drinking the water from this well. So let me talk to you about this well. It's called, because of the four saints buried here, it's called the Well of the Saints. And that's a phrase that John Millington Synge picked up when he was here on this island. You're talking about the 19th century now, when he was here. He was sent here by W.B. Yeats. They met in Paris, and W.B. Yeats said to him, "You need to go back to Ireland and to write plays and poetry and so on about the Irish Celtic tradition. the Irish language and the sacred places. And he suggested he come out here to the islands. I think that suited John Millington Synge because I think his uncle was a priest out here, so that worked for him. I mean a Protestant priest now, not a Catholic priest. He was an Anglican priest, his uncle, as far as I remember. So John Millington Synge came out here. He didn't stay too long on Inis Mór because he felt there was too much English being spoken here, and he ended up settling on Inis Mór, which rightly so. It's the purest form of the Irish language spoken on the three islands, is to be found on Inis Mór. And he got a house there which is now being turned into a museum, and also in Inis Mór you'll find Synge's seat, where apparently he used to walk out along the cliffs and sit down and meditate for a while. So he's very well remembered on Inis Mór, and some of his inspiration for his great plays and writings come from his experience here. And of course he wrote a book called The Aran Islands, which is an account of his experience living here, and it's a tremendous record of a life that disappeared shortly after he was here, when people got, if you like, what we call modernity, or electricity into their homes and water from the tap and all that sort of thing, and could buy their food in the shops. But in those days, they were subsistence living. They lived in simple houses built with local materials, made their own clothes, spoke the Irish language, produced their food from the environment around them, both on the land and in the sea and on the shore. And it's a life that he chronicles very beautifully, not just the actual physical challenges from day to day, finding shelter and food, but also the culture, the sophisticated rituals and prayers and way of living that these Aran Island people had. There's a lot to be admired in it even to this day. So back to this holy well. When he was on this island, he got an inspiration for a short a one-act play that he wrote called The Well of the Saints. And the well that he's referring to is this well here. Of course, he makes up a fictitious story about it, so it's not a true story, but he gets his inspiration from this well. But people, apart from John Millington Synge, have come here for centuries on pilgrimage, especially because of the grave of the four comely saints. And the day for coming, the traditional day, was August the 15th. Not a bad day, I suppose, because it's the middle of the summer, better chance to have good weather, and a lot of boats came over from the mainland, Connemara, to come here. So people had to have a good day for that too. And often they stayed overnight, or maybe even a few nights. And sometimes they'd even sleep on the grave, because that was the way of getting a blessing from these saints. So very ancient pilgrimage place that was remembered up to recently. There were two older people living here in a little house just down the way that I used to speak to before they died, and they told me about all the pilgrims who used to come here on August the 15th. That practice has died out a little bit now, and just a handful of locals might come here on that day nowadays. But when you come, you seek a blessing from the four saints buried here. You may choose to climb over the little wall and get onto the graves and lie down on them if you want to do that. And then I suppose even more importantly, you do the 7 rounds of the well. So that means you come here to the well, you take 7 stones, which are here in a basin beside the well. So there you are, there's my 7 stones. And now you start walking in a Thuras Deisle, a journey to the right, around the well, around the church, and back to the well again. And you pray your prayers or whatever you want to do as you're going around. And when you come back here, each time you drop 1 stone back into the basin beside the well, and that's the way you count your rounds. So let's start doing it now. Then when you have all your rounds done, you put your last stone into the basin, and then you kneel down and you take a drink from the water, or just bless yourself with the water, or whatever you want to do. Or take a bottle of the water away with you as a water of blessing. That's how it's done. Now I'll bring you into the church and we'll have a look inside. It's a tiny little church really. It wouldn't have held a big congregation, and even the door is quite low for small people. But before we go in, let's have a look at the plaque here on the side. So I read it for you in English. The present 15th century church doubtless occupies the site of an earlier church dedicated to the four comely saints, Fursey, Brendan of Birr, Conall and Berchan, who are said to be buried in the four graves near the church. Immediately south of the building is the Holy Well. Well, we've already had a look at the Holy Well, but let's now go into the church. So it's well looked after by the OPW. That's the Office of Public Works, and they maintain it for us. It's a national monument, and therefore it's well looked after. And this little section here at the back of the church, the west end, might have been a sort of a room dedicated to the resident priest who lived here. That often was the case, that the priest lived at the end of the church, and there was a little loft at the top of the church where he slept. The church itself then is tiny really. A lovely altar at the front on the east end, which is where the traditional Celtic way churches were built, and a window directly above the altar taking the light of the rising sun in the morning, representing the resurrection. And you can see here that a statue of Our Lady has been placed here, and if you look carefully, it's donated by Bridget Duran in 1994. Now, Bridget was an amazing woman who lived here. She was 100 years of age when she put this up. It was like a little memorial to her life on the island, and nobody wanted to take it down because she was an extraordinary person. She lived another 8 years. She lived until she was 108. Imagine that. And her life is extraordinary. She spent a lot of her time in Boston in her younger years and was a nurse's aide. And during the course of the election of John F. Kennedy, she campaigned on his behalf door to door and got to know the Kennedys, imagine. And when she came back to live here, she married, and her first husband died, and then she married her second husband, and he died. She outlived both of them. Her second husband was a brother of the first. And while she was living here, she got a Christmas card every year from the Kennedy family, and when one of the Kennedy family was appointed the ambassador to Ireland, the ambassador came to visit her in her home. So she was an extraordinary woman. Towards the end of her life, she wrote a little book called Woman of Arran, to distinguish it from the famous film Man of Arran. So she was Woman of Arran, and it's a little biography of her life. And for that, she got an honorary degree, a master's degree in literature from the Galway University. So all in all, amazing woman, amazing life, and somebody we want to continue to remember here and celebrate, because she was a very good symbol of strong femininity coming from the Aran Islands. Now while we're here, if you look west, you will see on the horizon there the outline of Dún Aengus on the top of the hill to the left of the picture, and then come back this way and you'll see two standing stones. The farther one away from us is actually 11 feet tall. It's quite narrow and thin, and then the one near us is a much wider, broader one, but not as tall. And these, you know, you can figure out what on earth they're about, and I think clearly they are placed there by human beings. They're not just happen to be there. So they obviously had a purpose, and I doubt if they're just scratching stones for cows to scratch off. I would say they're marking energy points, or perhaps an energy line, a ley line that would run from Dunangus through those two stones and then on here to the monastic site. You know, the ancient Irish people, including the Celtic monks, were very tuned into the energy of a place, and they did want to build their homes and especially their churches on an energy line or an energy point, because then that meant the whole environment was in tune with them, and they were in tune with the environment when they were doing their sacred liturgies. So it's all a bit mysterious, but I think that's part of our Irish tradition, is to discover all these mysteries. And you might never find an answer, but it's still wonderful to be thinking of them. Now, before we leave the site, just look around at the land around the site, because there's all these big boulders sticking up out of the ground, and it would suggest that there were buildings here in the past. Now, they'd never been excavated, but I'm sure if they were, we would discover a lot more about the history of this location and what was going on here in the past. These remains of buildings in the ground have to be an awful lot older than the 15th century church, and may even go back to the time of the four comely saints, and it would be very interesting to find out what exactly was going on here. But these boulders sort of suggest that there's something mysterious still to be discovered about this place. Now, on the way out, going the same way that we came in, you might notice down in the ground, you better notice it, because if you don't, you could put your foot down it, a holy well, another well, and it is a holy well, the second well associated with the four saints. In fact, there's a well associated with each of them, or there's supposed to be a well associated with each of them. But you can see here there's water in this one, so that's for sure. So that's the second holy well. Then as we go out of here, I'll show you the third one. So the third one is out this gap here. You'll recognise the large platform on the far side, the way we came in. And instead of turning left, which would bring you back out onto the road, you turn right. And you come up the wall here until you find a holy water font at the base of the wall. There it is there. And again, there's always water in it. And this well clearly is not a well at all. It's what you might call a bull-on stone, a holy water font that maybe was in an earlier church here, which is now gone. But people come here to take water from it for healing purposes, and especially for the healing of the eyes. This one is particularly associated with healing for your eyes. And you can see the whole area around it has been cleaned back and kept very well, so that people can access it and get their blessing. So it's still regarded as a sacred and important place here today. So I've never found the fourth holy well belonging to the four saints. Maybe it's out there somewhere, but I think it's been forgotten unless it can be rediscovered. But here behind me is where the well for the village was, the domestic well, not a holy well, although all wells were sacred, you have to say. But you know, for a village to grow across this island, and there are 14 of them, but for them to begin to grow, they had to be near a well, because that was the source of the water. They didn't have piped water going into the house like we have today. So the closer you built your house to a well, the better it was, because you had to carry that water, and water is quite heavy. So this was the well for the local village, and you can see it's a bit neglected now, because people don't need to go to the well for water anymore. But it's still nice to preserve these places and to locate them, because every village had to have one. And if we were to go around the 14 villages of the island, we would find the well that was the source of water for each of the small communities that lived around it. And that's something precious and something to be looked after and minded. So I think someday this well will be tidied up too. Anyway, that's the end of our visit to the Cheathrair Álainn, the four comely saints. You can find all the information about these various sites that I'm bringing you to in my book called Legends in the Landscape. It's available on our website, aislingpublications.com. That's spelled AISLING. ashlingpublications.com. You can also access it through my own website, daramolloy.com, DARAMOLLOY.com. And you'll find in this all the background information, or all the actual information I'll be giving you at these various sites. So enjoy, and remember that both my wife Tess and I have other books we've written as well. You might be interested in Globalization of God, which is a story of how Celtic Christianity got suppressed in favour of Roman Christianity, but it's interesting to see what that Celtic Christianity looked like. And another book I've written more recently called Reimagining the Divine, a Celtic Spirituality of Experience. And there'll be further books in the future. My wife then has written 2 books, one called Young at Heart, which is about Jungian psychology and how you can use it to help your psychological health, your psychological life. And then her latest book called Inis Mór, a collection of her photographs and her poetry about the island, which has turned out to be very popular and is selling very well. So you can access all of those at the websites I've just mentioned. See you next time. These stories and all the other stories that are to be found on the Aran Islands can be found in my book Pocket Guide to Álainn, Legends in the Landscape, and that's available from our website www.ashlingpublications.com, with Aisling spelled AISLING, so ashlingpublications.com. There's one other book there on your screen, The Globalization of God, Celtic Christianity's Nemesis, which was my first book that I wrote apart from the Pocket Guide. I wrote the Pocket Guide a long time before it. But this was, if you like, my first, more intellectual, more academic type book. It's a study of history, really, and an interpretation of history to show how Christianity really emerged from Judaism, and how Christianity took on the idea of becoming a global church. To do that, it had to sort of be based in Rome as its sort of centre, with the Pope becoming, if you like, the CEO of the organisation, and equating himself to the Emperor of Rome, and the whole thing then became a very authoritarian structure. And as that version of Christianity spread throughout the world, especially on the back of colonisation, which was the main way of spreading it, so it was spread by violence and by a lot of destruction and a lot of removal of indigenous spiritualities. That was the downside of it, that all the indigenous ways of, if you like, discovering the divine in their lives and expressing that in their mythology and in their sacred practices were all wiped out, which was such a shame. It was a destruction of diversity. And I suppose the book focuses on one of those indigenous ways of practicing Christianity, which was the Celtic Christian tradition, a tradition steeped in its own Celtic spiritual background, which had many gods and goddesses. So a very different form of Christianity. So part of this storytelling that I call the globalization of God is the story of the wiping out of Celtic Christianity. It happened first where it had spread throughout Europe and in Britain, and it happened then much later back in Ireland, which had never been part of the Roman Empire, so it took longer to subject that to Rome, but it did in the end with the Norman invasion of Ireland in the 12th century. So if you're interested in history, you might like that book too.